Hello and welcome to CIC Start Online webinar here at Glasgow Caledonian University. My name is Branka Dimitrijević and I will moderate today's event. Our seminars and webinars disseminate outcomes of feasibility studies and academic consultancies on sustainable building design and refurbishment. Our project supports collaboration between 7 Scottish universities and Scottish small to medium-sized enterprises. The project is funded by European Regional Development Fund and the CIC program of Scottish Government, currently managed by Scottish Funding Council. This is a live event, so in case of fire alarm, we will have to stop. You can rejoin us later, but if you are not able, you will always be able to watch a video recording of this webinar on our website. We plan to finish the presentations around 1:30. You can start using your chat facility at any time during the presentations. After the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. The event will close around 2 o'clock. If some questions cannot be answered during this time, we will always send you answers from our speakers by email. We are not able to offer today a live transcription service, but it will be provided later. Transcription of this webinar will be provided later. So the title of today's seminar and webinar is Communication Strategies to Minimize Water Consumption in Social Housing. And the speakers are Dr. Mehreen of Heriot University and Stuart Young of Home Log Book Company. We had apologies from Dr. Gillian Menzies of Heriot University, who was also involved in this project, but she could not come today. And we also have a guest here today. It is Dr. Anita Meldrum. She is a lecturer at Glasgow Caledonian University, and she has over 25 years of experience in the water industry, in design and in project management. So she will help us with some questions later on during the webinar. So I would kindly ask you, Mehreen, to start with your presentation now.
Thank you, Branka. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mehreen, and I'm going to talk about the project that I did, which is communication strategies to minimize water consumption in social housing. The main objectives of this research were, first of all, understanding the attitudes of housing association tenants towards water use in their homes, how they think about their water use, and if there's anything they can do to minimize or save water in their homes. Elicit tenants' preferred media for communicating water conservation messages, and then also, in the end, to recommend some strategies to encourage tenants to participate in a program of widespread water metering in housing association dwellings. So we started with, first of all, understanding the water use. Its efficiency of water has become really important recently, mainly because of the lack of availability of water in some parts of the world, in southern border of our country. Also, it's due to climate change. So it's important that we think about water efficiency, and when we use water, especially when we use hot water, we use energy. And using energy means that we are generating carbon dioxide emissions, and which is not very helpful to our environment. So how do we find out how we can find strategies to reduce the consumption or wastage of water? And when we look at some of the statistics of the UK, we have found that the domestic water heating emits around 5% of the UK's carbon dioxide emissions. So reducing energy consumption, saving water, and then reducing energy consumption means that it will save bills for our householders, reduce local environmental impacts, and also carbon dioxide emissions, not only from a consumer perspective, but also from the companies who supply water in terms of the amount of energy required to pump, heat, and treat water. Initial research, we have also found out that it's quite difficult to engage a public in raising awareness about water conservation, mainly because, especially in Scotland, we have abundance of water. I'll talk about this a bit more when I go to my slides further. So this project is a part of Scottish Water's wider resource planning. Scottish Water is the largest and the only public company in Scotland which provides water to around 2.5 million customers. And also they are the biggest consumer of energy, and to help government in reducing this consumption, they have planned their next 25-year plan. And what they want to understand is the demand scenarios for water supply over the next 25 years. And they also want to establish a specification in social housing that deliver maximum water efficiency. And the main objectives of Scottish Water are that they want to raise awareness. They want to test a number of approaches towards water advice. They also want to analyze the behavioral change patterns within 400 housing association households spread among 5 housing associations. And all this is to influence consumer behavior to reduce average daily water consumption. So I'm going to talk a little bit about water use. Just a bit of background. England and Wales, approximately 19 billion litres of water per day is provided from 2,100 licensed surface and groundwater abstractions, and over half of this is consumed by the householders. In Scotland, it's provided by Scottish Water, and the main demand, which is 55% of household consumption, comes from the Central Belt, which is Glasgow and Edinburgh regions. And this is a table from Bathroom Manufacturer House Association, Waterwise, and Environmental Agency. And just to give you an insight to what sort of activities lead to water consumption and how by changing an approach we can minimize this consumption. So for instance, brushing teeth, fill a beaker to rinse twice a day. And if you don't leave the tap running, then it only uses 1 liter of water. But if you brush for 5 minutes a day with tap running, then it uses 50 liters of water per day. Another example is watering the garden. So watering can filled with tap water, so it's only 8 to 10 liters. Whereas if we use sprinkler for an hour, then it means that we are using 500 plus liters. So how can we find out how behavior change can make an impact on this usage? Just to give you some insight into this. And before I tell you about some of the results of this research, I will talk about the methodology that we used in this project. So we employed qualitative investigation and the communication strategies to encourage tenants to participate in this program. We conducted some interviews because we can measure behavior by metering or by using other devices, technological devices, but then how can we assess customer attitudes? This is where investigation, in terms of qualitative investigation, plays an important role. How we make sure that the strategy that we are trying to target, it suits our audience, our customers. And this can be best assessed by carrying out interviews. Face-to-face interviews are very, very good in understanding people's perceptions, understanding, I'm just going back to this slide because here I'm trying to, qualitative investigation, we try to understand the needs of people, their attitudes, their perceptions, behaviors, and their interests. We can do probing. If they come up with an answer, then we can further examine why they have said that. So it gives us more information rather than a questionnaire or a focus group. So we get time to spend with a person individually, so that gives us more information. So we carried out semi-structured interviews. The reason we chose semi-structured interviews is to allow the flexibility of changing questions depending on our tenants. So we spoke to Blackwood Housing Association and we also spoke to Muirhouse Housing Association. A majority of our participants come from Blackwood Housing Association. So there were 8 face-to-face interviews. Just a little background to Blackwood Housing Association. They provide sheltered housing, which means that all the apartments are connected, and they have also a communal lounge, laundry, guest bedrooms, and a staff office. And it's mainly designed for elderly tenants with disabilities and wheelchair requirements, people with limited mobility. 5 tenants from their one-off estates in Tweedbridge Court in Peebles, which contains 38 self-contained flats, and then 3 tenants from Abbey Court in Edinburgh, which contains 44 self-contained flats. From Muir House Housing Association carried out 4 telephone interviews because tenants weren't interested in face-to-face interviews, so they preferred speaking over the phone. Muir Housing, they have 445 properties in Edinburgh, and some of them which are designed for meeting the needs of people with disabilities. The themes that we explored during this investigation is we wanted to know if they receive any water conservation information in the first place, if they regard water as a precious resource, motivations from tenants for water savings, what actions they take to reduce water wastage, their views on effective and memorable campaign, who do they trust, from where would they like to receive any messages so that it will have an impact on them, what sort of actions they think will influence water efficiency, what's the best medium for communication, would they prefer to receive information on the utility bills, and what sort of barriers they reckon are which are causing hurdles to adopting any conservation measures. So all these interviews were taped and fully transcribed, and then the analysis was performed by looking at these transcripts quite a few times to understand and to sort of organize them into the same themes. And because in semi-structured interviews you cannot really stick to questions that you have planned, so you may have to change depending on the person you speak to. So it's quite time consuming to understand and to sort of format all the themes together. I'll share some of the results with you now. When we spoke to tenants about the need to conserve water, it was almost all of them were unaware of the need to conserve water, mainly because they do not recall ever receiving any information regarding water efficiency. And even if we have seen a device water which promotes water efficiency, they do not really know the reason behind it, other than just maybe some cost savings. Although they recognize that water is the most important resource when they compare it with energy, crisis, pollution, transport and recycling, but still they do not think that it's the climate change or is the implications of the future that they need to conserve water. For instance, one of the quotes from one of the tenants is regarding the importance of water is that a man can live without food much longer than he can live without water. So they do realize the need, but at the same time they do not understand any reasons behind water conservation. When we spoke to them about the motivation to save water, they do not come up with any specific answer other than saying that they think it's silly to waste water. There's no specific reason. It's just their own welfare and nothing else. Before I'll share this table with you, just a little bit information. So these are our 12 respondents here. And this is the age band. So it ranges from 35 to 44 years of age up to 75 to 84. And 8 of them, 8 of the participants we spoke to were female and 4 were male. And you can see most of them have some kind of disability. Either it is mobility disability or hearing problem or sight problems. And further asking about their motivations, because they couldn't give any specific answer, some people said that they remember the war times when there was such a lack of water, and they used to collect water from areas further away from their towns or villages, and they used to collect it in water butts and water tanks. to feed their cattle and to use it for their gardens. So I had to steer, we had to steer questions in a different route, asking them about if they think of any campaign other than water conservation which has an impact on them, just to understand a feature of that campaign which can help us to promote water efficiency for our social housing. And some of the campaigns they came up with is the recent one, which is the swine flu campaign, the Children in Need, Somalia Aid, Indian Aid, recycling they talked about. A couple of people talked about actually recycling campaign. And when we analyzed the communicating medium for these campaigns, so most of these campaigns are on TV. So straight away we can see that the TV seems like an important and seems like an common medium for communication, which plays an important role in lives of people. There are a few radio adverts, but at the same time, direct mailing is still there. So you can, some people prefer to receive letters and flyers. And the impact feature is how they relate this information because it touched their heart. For instance, saving children in India, showing pictures that children are in hunger or they have problems, or thirst quenching adverts, other exceptional natural beauty, and chilling facts about global warming. Some people said that they're quite effective in getting people's attention. And in terms of recycling campaign, they talked about that it's a campaign which has given people information, and then also the provision of actual bins, which made people do recycling. So although it took some time, but now people are aware of how to recycle their waste. Then we spoke to them about who do they trust for receiving any messages, or who do they trust for any advice. And we given them the options of family and friends, social landlords, religious leaders, politicians, government, water companies, and independent bodies. And straight away you can see that nobody has given any vote for politicians. The more they trust is the water companies. The majority of them trust water companies. And the main reason they explained is because they have all the information. They know how much money they spend in delivering water, how much carbon emissions they're generating. So they have all the facts. People also mentioned trust on independent bodies because they have no motives, they have no objectives of any kind. And they also trust government organizations along with social landlords. So that as long as their social landlords give them a clear message, it's likely to make an impact on them. And family and friends also, but then family and friends may not have all the facts they need. Another theme which emerged is what sort of actions influence water efficiency. So for instance, if telling people about climate change, if telling them about what are the threats in future, if the water will be less available or if there will be less rainfall, would that make an impact? And you can see that's the least voted factor. And when we talked about school education, so they recognize that this process has to be slow. So it should start from school with giving children information in school, and then they spread the message in their families. And when they grow older, then they have an idea of how to make water and energy efficiency. Restrictions, some people also mentioned restrictions, which means that unless there are any regulations or penalties, then it's hard that people will are forced or motivated to do any sort of water conservation. And media communication, if messages are given to them through different mediums, then then it's likely to make more impact. Then we specifically asked them about effective medium for communication, and we've given them different options. So from text messages to email, Twitter, Facebook, direct mailing, phone calls, websites, displays and posters, printed materials, radio, TV. Depending on the sample of participants we spoke to, they weren't very interested in email or Twitter and Facebook, mainly because most of them do not have access. And even if they have access, they prefer receiving letters so that they can sit down in their chairs and they can have a read of the information that comes through. They enjoy watching TV and they enjoy listening to radio, especially with people with sighting problems. They are much comfortable with radio than television. At the same time, they also say that it may not be a good idea to just focus on one medium, because people have different choices, they have different preferences. So if the same message comes from a combination of medium, then it's likely to make more impact. But TV is a favorite medium for all generations, whether it's children or younger adults or maybe the older people. And then when talking to them about how, if they would like to see any information on the utility bills, in fact, all of them do not recognize that sending information at the back of utility bills is a good thing, because they even struggle to understand the information regarding their own bill, and then looking at the back with the small type script is not very helpful. And I'll read out some of the quotes, the actual quotes from some of the people we spoke to. So, I can't read or understand the bills that are presented to me. The typeface is far too small. It's unintelligible. If it had bigger print and spaced more out, then I would definitely be able to read as I read the paper. Second one, if information is added at the back of a bill regarding how we conserve water, then I think it's a better way of communicating. People would read it, would not they? Well, I would anyway, because I read everything that comes in front of me. So it may be just one person or some people who read information, but majority, like this one, absolutely hopeless. It's way too complicated, honestly, especially gas bills, and I don't pay attention to what is at the back of a bill. And then talking to them about barriers to adopting conservation measures. There are different sort of messages that we found out. Some people said unless there are some restrictions, people will not listen. Like we have water meters in England, in south of the border, and then people keep an eye on their water consumption because they know they have to pay. And some people just simply don't recognize the need of saving water because they think in Scotland water is taken for granted, it's abundant, we have no problems, and they don't see any problem of any lack of water availability in future at all. A couple of quotes here. Oh well, no matter what I do, it's just a drop in the ocean, literally. It can't be too vital if they can allow leaks to go on. Because we have only got two big cities, Glasgow and Edinburgh, I can't remember the last time there was a hose pipe ban here for the Central Belt. So these are some of the results, and I've concluded with some main findings. So there's no awareness of water conservation in Scotland at all. Saving water, no concern. Believe that with plenty of rainfall in Scotland, there is no threat to water supply at all. TV is regarded as the most influential medium for all age types. A majority with no access to internet. And due to having physical disabilities, a lot of tenants prefer receiving written information such as letters, leaflets, and booklets, which they can read sitting down and in their own time. And then finally, some of the recommendations. The use of more than one medium for communication would satisfy the needs of the majority. Information at the back of utility bills should not be provided. And because it's a sheltered, the tenants we spoke to, they live in a sheltered accommodation where they have monthly meetings with their housing association, and they prefer sitting in their communal lounge and listening to them. And they think that medium of communication is best as long as somebody from Scottish Water or a person is present who has all the information about the facts. That will have major chances of making an impact on them and making them understand about water conservation techniques. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would kindly ask Stuart to start with his presentation.
Thank you, Branka. Our role within this position, within this project, just to explain, is to project manage the delivery of this water efficiency project within the Scottish Housing Association sector. And when we started off with 5 housing associations, we're actually very lucky. We're now up to 8 housing associations, because as other housing associations heard about it, more wanted to take part. So we were very lucky in being able to achieve the target of 400 households. As part of the project, though, we needed to understand about water, people's attitudes to water, and this is why we asked Heriot to come into the project to do this first analysis for us. But in terms of approaching the project, we had to understand the linkages that people might make between water, their lifestyle, their house, energy, the property. And this diagram is to try and highlight the different circles of influence, as we call it, where water actually may play an impact or may have an impact on someone's life, health and well-being. And it's quite interesting that water is delivered by a local authority or some kind of government body. So we can see within this circle here the local authorities and the water utility company has a role to play. But water also impacts the condition of a property. It affects energy and energy bills. It also has an impact, and very importantly, on health and well-being. So we want to try and understand how we would take something like water and make it resonate with people, that it would be of interest to them and respond to it. To explain the project at a higher level, we needed to look at getting a message across to people that they would take a more prudent use to water. And it's very important to explain that this project was not about getting people to reduce their water usage for the sake of it, but it was getting them to understand the impacts of how they can reduce water and the impacts that would have on them. For example, in Scotland, we know that on average, each person uses 150 litres of water per person per day, which is actually very, very high. And we know that trials that have been done in England, that if we reduce that down to 130 litres per water per day per person, there is no noticeable impact on the lifestyle or any adverse impact on that person. This has a huge strain on our natural resource. Now, we do enjoy a lot of water here in Scotland, but there are a number of issues on that in terms of where the water falls, how it's captured and managed and stored and transported to our homes. And there's a huge cost attached to that, and it causes a huge strain on the infrastructure when we're all using 150 waters of litre per day. So we needed to identify ways in which we could help people understand that and get that message across to them, but just telling people that wasn't really going to resonate with them. It wasn't going to have a high impact. So if you think back to that circle, we looked at energy and the cost of what is the cost of having water in your home. And based on WaterWise and Energy Saving Trust stats, it's approximately around water impacts by 23% of your energy bill in your home. And this relates to heating the water, having a bath, shower, washing, children, people who are housebound. And we find that linking water with the cost of energy had a higher impact than just talking about water by itself. So this became part of the whole communication strategy and theme that we used in talking to tenants to get them involved in this project and to hopefully take a proactive approach. So how we're going to do this, we designed a communication strategy very much to suit the audience, and this was very important as we went through it. And what Heriot were able to do for us on this project was to help us define that and really understand it, and their report themselves highlighted the importance of this. And the project was to bring a different and independent view and understand what may resonate with people, that they would respond to it. Scotland is wet. There's not a problem. And I think even before this project started, we all knew that this would be the view of people in general, because even sitting around a table, you speak to people about that, we don't have an issue. But we used this research to help refine a communication strategy and to understand what would be the best channels in which to reach different types of people, by age, by geography, by their lifestyle, by their economic status, and their household structure. What was very key as we went through the project was the messenger. Who delivered that message to people? And it was very important, what became very important was that it had to come from a trusted source, as Mehreen pointed out. And as part of this, it was seen that the person delivering that message had to be an expert in their field and be able to talk very naturally about the linkages between water and energy. And we brought in Energy Saving Trust to carry out this frontline communications for us, because Energy Saving Trust have a wealth of experience in this area. We're able to provide other levels of support and skills to help tenants understand about water and about energy bills, as well as other support services that they provide. On top of this, Energy Saving Trust were able to deal with people's fears that about what this project might be about, and alleviate the concerns that they might have, is that why were they being asked to reduce their water usage. But it was very important that, as Energy Saving Trust, who they were and who they are, were seen as this credible resource. And I think this is very important in the future going forward for any kind of communications. It was also important to highlight what other people are doing around this area, and as part of that messaging we had to make sure that people didn't feel that they were being picked on or they were being targeted solely. So it was made very clear to them that this was part of a much wider national initiative, that they were taking part in something that other people were taking part in. And what was very interesting from that is people were more likely to take part in the project when they saw or understood that other people were taking part. What we actually found as the project went on, people who declined to take part in the project, once they heard that their friends and neighbours were taking part, they actually started taking part. So our recruitment numbers actually went up very well. The other thing around the communications, which is quite interesting, which in fact is quite obvious, is that water is quite a dull topic. It's not very interesting, and it's difficult to discuss a topic that we don't actually really think about on a daily basis. And water is in fact something that we take for granted. We don't really think about, it rains outside, what's the problem? But it doesn't always rain in the right places in Scotland, and water has to be transported. The communications had to be very focused on the audience, the people we were speaking to. And in this particular instance, within the social housing sector in Scotland, it's a very, very financially sensitive sector. So the approach to this was by highlighting the genuine link between water and energy bills. Highlighting to people, people don't think about the cost of heating water in their homes, they don't think about the cost of getting water to their home, but there is a direct link to managing that water in our homes, and there's many behavioural factors that increase our energy bills relating back to water, in terms of the running of the bath and overfilling of the bath, the filling of the kettle when we run our washing machines. So linking that to energy bills, which is very, very topical just now, helped to get a message, quite a dull topic, across to people very, very quickly. The Energy Saving Trust advice from the outset was to focus on quality rather than high volume. So some people might look at this and say, well, 400 properties is actually not a very high number of people, but statistically actually we can get a very good representation of the Scottish RSL sector of tenants within that. What was very strong from their advice was to try and invest very heavily at the front end in the whole recruitment strategy. So we decided to invest on the whole recruitment processes and explaining to people on a one-to-one basis, where someone from Energy Saving Trust went into people's houses and spent up to 45 minutes explaining to people the importance of water, getting involved in the project, the impacts on them, and making sure that we alleviated their fears. So that's a very expensive exercise to carry out, but what we found was the quality of recruitment was very, very high. As part of this as well, we're looking at bringing about some form of behaviour change, and we looked at ways of linking the installation of the water meters was a big challenge in people's environment. And what we mean by that is, when we try to install a water meter in someone's house or water monitor, quite often people can't be bothered, they're not really that interested. And what we had to look at was, well, what was the best way of getting through to people? When is the best time to get through to people as well to install a water meter? Because it is quite a disruptive exercise, and quite often people can't be bothered. And what was very clear out of this project is we had to link it to an event taking place in their home or their life. And in this particular instance for this project, was the housing associations involved were installing new kitchens and bathrooms. So we linked the installation of the water monitors to a positive event taking place in their home, the upgrading of the property, and as part of the housing association's wider energy efficiency initiatives and ways that they were trying to help their customers. So as part of that communications and part of the delivery side was linking to a positive impact or a change, so that the introduction of a behavioural change became normal or would be more readily accepted. I think this figure hopefully speaks very much for itself. The recruitment strategies that we've seen in England, the conversion ratios are actually very low. From what we understand, they're below double figures. The outcomes from this particular project we saw, we got a 68% conversion ratio, which is very, very high. And I think that figure in itself speaks a great deal about the whole recruitment strategy and communications process that we carried out through this project. The work that was put in by Heriot Watt at the front end and Energy Saving Trust and then ourselves was to very much focused on achieving a very high conversion ratio. So we always had that mindset. There had been discussion about blanket communications to people, but what we have learned from this project is blanket communications do not work, and it has to be very much targeted at the audience that you're speaking to. And that also transcribes across to if you're dealing with private properties, new builds, high-rise properties, understanding the types of people that you're dealing with, the households, understanding the property types that they're in, looking at what energy costs might be at this moment in time, condition of property, economic status, and indeed educational status of the people that you're dealing with. What is clear, you need to use different types of media and different types of messaging to get that message across to people so that they will take it on board. And in this particular instance, it was linking energy bills with water, and we find that this proved to be a very successful project in this communication strategy. And this will then be taken back and used by Scottish Water themselves as they look at further initiatives that they look at helping people to reduce water consumption.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Well, while we are waiting for questions from our online viewers, maybe we have some questions here from Anita Meldrum, who is here with us. She's off camera, but she can ask some questions regarding your presentations. You're welcome. Oh, she's on camera now, I see. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I was very interested because as you were talking, Mehreen, I was thinking, well, I'm thinking of the older people who had the experience of the wartime restrictions would probably be very good at conserving water because they got into the habit quite early on, compared with their age now, of conserving generally. And it was quite interesting to see that you found that as a finding. How did that contrast with the younger people that you canvassed?
For this particular project, we didn't get a chance to speak to relatively younger people. It's just only a couple of people, and the one person I spoke to, she was in the bracket of, like, as you can class them as younger, but she has two really young children. And what she said is that because she's conscious of wasting anything, maybe looking at the campaigns as I spoke about, like the Somalia aid and the Indian aid, and she said, since I have seen those adverts, every time my children go and brush their teeth, I sort of just close the tap down and I said, don't waste water. That's sort of incentive, and it's not just for her but also for other members of her family, so she's sort of spreading the message. And since I spoke to her, she said that she's now more aware of what we are trying to research, and hopefully she'll be able to communicate it to the same age group. And she was quite keen on Facebook, and she's one of those people who are very much into social media, and so she said that I like to receive messages through that medium of communication, and I'll let all of my family and friends know about this. So, but other than that, there is no other experience in their life they can refer to, like older age groups where they have experience of war or other hardships they faced when they were young.
Stuart, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say what was quite interesting through this project is as we captured information about households, we also tried to understand how many households actually had internet access or access to digital TV, Sky and Virgin, as potential communications medium. And what we did find is younger households do have access to the internet, either very limited fixed line access, but they would have mobile access to the internet. And the use or penetration of digital TV was quite high, and it was quite noticeable that in what you might call younger type of households. So that in itself allowed us to think moving forward of how do we use those channels to target those different types of people or those different household structures, and I think it's quite important there.
Here is a question now from one online viewer. John Stinson of Scottish Energy Centre asks, is there a desire to install water meters to baseline the existing level of consumption, shedding light on the assumed 150 litres per person per day, to verify the self-reported levels of unknown consumption and measuring the consumption logged after water saving strategy had been deployed?
That's a very good question, and you're absolutely right. The first year of this project is purely to capture baseline data. So as the monitors are being installed just now, over the next year, nothing will happen. There's no interventions, behavioural interventions being introduced at all to capture an actual baseline data. And what we're doing is capturing that baseline data by property type combined with household structure. And out of that will enable us then to design a range of different types of interventions. So you're absolutely right, it's a very, very good point.
Okay. Any more questions, Anita?
I think it's quite interesting that you're introducing metering. I know there have been pilot studies done south of the border in various types of housing stock and using metering, and it hasn't always resulted in economies in water use. People have sometimes made the choice that now they know how much they're spending on water, and compared with the other bills, it's quite a lot less. They've chosen to expend more on water. And sort of the linkage with the energy and the water bill is quite interesting because energy is quite contentious at the moment. Do you think water is going to become a contentious issue too? As people become more aware of it?
I think certainly from our understanding from Scottish Government, there's no appetite to bring in water metering. So this project was quite important. About this project, it's not about metering in the sense that we'd normally understand. It is very much about monitoring. But my understanding is, and it's been made very clear to us, this is not a precursor to metering.
But what about the fact, who is the highest consumer of energy in Scotland?
Scottish Water.
Isn't that a strong message for everyone?
I think it's well worth understanding as well what this project is part of. It's part of a much wider initiative that Scottish Water have. Is they are the largest consumer of energy in Scotland, and what that reflects is the cost of managing water. Water is a very, very heavy matter to transport and look after, and one of the things we're experiencing, there are population shifts in Scotland where there is a population shift from west to east. But it mainly rains in the west, so we capture water in the west, but it then has to be transported to the east coast of Scotland to meet this change in population plus growth in industry, for example. And this project is also looking at saying, well, if we can all do our little bit. I mean, there was a comment made about, well, it's only a drop in the ocean, but if everyone was able to reduce their water consumption by 10, 20 litres per day, that would have a huge positive impact on the infrastructure of Scottish Water and by default the CO2 emissions or carbon emissions that they do are guilty of. The other side of it as well is what Scottish Water wants to try and do is in reducing their CO2 emissions is looking at how they're managing their infrastructure. It's a very, very complex thing to manage and run. Water leakages aren't an issue, but Scottish Water have been very successful in reducing the water leakages. But what we have to remember is water is not an infinite resource. I mean, it is limited in terms of how we can deal with it and manage it, and we've seen that in decline of water levels in Scotland. So there's a whole range of different influences in terms of the carbon emissions of energy, and we can all have a positive impact in that as well.
One more question from John Stinson of Scottish Energy Centre. Does the delivery team of the water saving advice foresee the mass rollout of promoting water saving behaviour to take 45 minutes tailored home visit for most homes in Scotland to get the message across?
So that's a long question, isn't it?
Does the delivery team of this water saving advice foresee the mass rollout of promoting water saving behaviour to take 45 minutes tailored home visits for most homes in Scotland to get the message across, or are there other strategies that you're planning?
Yes, no, that's true. I don't think we could spend 45 minutes in every household in Scotland. No, one of the outputs of this project, which is a 3-year project, will be the learnings of what kinds of interventions will help people to reduce their water usage without having an adverse impact on their lives. And by the heavy investment in these projects will help us to identify future communication strategies across Scotland, because you just couldn't justify that cost. As mentioned, this project is about understanding water usage by household type, by age profile, by the household structure, and as we roll that out across Scotland, you could then start to build up patterns and different types of communication messages that could be used for different types of people across Scotland as a whole.
I'd be interested to know if you explored at all this whole issue of the retail water market. Was anybody aware of that? And would they be happy to be having a market for water like the market for energy, where you can switch to get a cheaper provider?
I can only very briefly touch on this because of my lack of knowledge of the retail and non-residential side, because we're not involved in that, but there is a separate business within Scottish Water called Business Stream, and they're the ones that do the non-residential water metering, where it is actually billing, but we're not actually involved in that, but non-residential properties do get metered and do pay bills on that. And my understanding, but I stand to be correct, is I think Business Stream now has a license to operate in England, as other water companies can operate in Scotland to sell water, but for non-residential properties.
No questions, Anita?
Well, I mean, the intention, as I understand it, across the UK is to have, I mean, obviously, industries are metered by regulation. They have to meter their water usage. I understand that by 2030 there was a government plan to have at least voluntary metering in households as well. So
I think that's. I think it's 2019 where all residential homes are to have utilities metering, but I think that's very much gas and electricity, and I think that applies in Scotland as well. But water, being Scottish Water being who it is, and in Scotland it's still going to be remain in the public domain. So there won't, as I say, as I understand, there's not a mandate there to, or this is not a precursor to water metering in the residential sector. But I think it's quite interesting to get that message across to people, to understand about water and the impacts it has on their energy bill, that it's not free. We all actually pay for our water through our council tax bills. I think through this project we've actually found out that there's still a perception out there amongst a number of people that we don't pay for our water. Well, in fact, we all do through our council tax. It's just one of those bills that's almost like a hidden cost, but there is a very high cost to it in terms of our annual bills, money out of our pockets, and an indirect link, or in fact a very close link, with our energy bills. So it does impact our daily lives and our daily cost.
Mm-hmm. There is an additional question, one more question from John Stinson of Scottish Energy Centre. What would the research team see as the appliance that is the worst offender of water wastage in the home?
Gosh, I think take your pick almost. I think there was one comment made about leaving the taps on for brushing our teeth. Yeah. I think we're all very guilty of that. I think there's an interesting point there, is that Mehreen brought up as well, is that one of my daughters, who's still at nursery school, last summer pulled me up about running the tap whilst I was brushing my teeth. So clearly there's something going on at an education or a much younger level, which I think is absolutely right. There is an argument to suggest that people, by the time we all reach over 35, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We're creatures of habit. And maybe as a longer term strategy is by bringing an education to younger people to understand the use of water. I think we talk about filling baths, filling kettles, using sinks instead of basins when we're doing our dishes, not filling the dishwasher properly. We're seeing in a lot of properties we all have newer technologies or more technology to wash our clothes and wash our dishes. And I think it's really a wide combination of factors. You can't say it's one single factor. We're seeing the introduction of, in a lot of new build developments now, water butts and things like that to help people in terms of watering their garden. Although I think you'll agree there hasn't been much of an issue this year in Scotland. But looking at it longer term, there are issues, and it's a whole range of different things, from washing cars as well.
I think if you have a traditional building where you haven't had an updated bathroom put in, for example, as we're talking about appliances, traditional toilets usually have a 6-litre flush. So I suppose it depends how frequently you go to the toilet. But that's the biggest actual individual user now of water in older properties. In new properties, of course, you've got the opportunity to have a quick flush or a longer flush.
Yeah, it's a dual flush.
So things are changing in that respect, and you can get much more water efficient.
I think it's about how you use an appliance rather than which appliance, because as you said, dishwashers might be more economical. Some tenants did say that it's more economical if you have a full dishwasher, have a setting which is not at a very high temperature, then it might be more economical than just using tap water for continuously washing your dishes. So it's about behavior and how you make use of your appliances.
Here is a suggestion from John Stinson of Scottish Energy Centre. If it's a basic point of taps being the worst offender, would a key strategy for RSR to bring in timer taps to motivate the water saving through forced behaviour change?
There's 2 points there about restrictors, flow restrictors on taps. We know that from experience where the flow restrictors have been put in, people take them out. It's one of these behavioural things. Even when people fill a kettle, they want to do it quickly. They want to see that rush of water coming out, and that's a very difficult thing to do. Restrictors do affect people's lives. There's a perception there that they don't want that, and they will try and take them out. And it's the same with on shower heads. If there are flow restrictors in there, people will take them out. The interesting point there about forced behaviour change. That's a challenge. You have to be very careful with that. But I think what is interesting, what we're seeing through building regulations now, and with the development of technology, bathroom technologies, kitchen technologies, is that maybe it's less of an argument of human behavioural change, but maybe it's the appliances that we're using may have a more positive impact in terms of like the dual flush loo and the size of basin in the property. I know that there are technologies now where on the actual taps in the bathroom they're on a timer, so they go off after I think 6 seconds or a certain period of time, so that if you can actually set them so that if you're brushing your teeth. So maybe it's a combination of the new types of basins and sinks and loos that are coming into place and sizes of baths, and a combination in terms of human behaviour. And one of the things that we'll look at this project next year are looking at the range of interventions, from soft to hard interventions, and what combinations of interventions have a positive impact on different people and different types of people and different household structures. Because we can't, you've got to be very wary of someone who's elderly and housebound compared to the young family with 2 children and a dog and 2 cars in the driveway. And what different things will work to help bring about that behaviour change. But I think Mehreen's touched on the point as well, is education, I think, is very important in this. It's part of that mix.
Well, it is interesting. We are now talking about communication with tenants and how we educate also children and young people to save water. So that is one level, one part of potential action. But we can also see that better water management or better harvesting of water, management of storing of the water or recycling, reuse of the water, are other strategies that can be used and maybe even have much stronger impact than just turning the tap down a little bit. If we harvest a lot of rainwater and become rich, it can be used in other ways. It could be even sold and so on. So there is the whole wider range of issues that could be considered. Will your project go touch any of these strategies?
It's interesting you mention that, because this project is, there's another project now that we're involved in that's taking place, is looking at the new build sector. And this is where I briefly mentioned about the installing, for example, things like water butts into these new build developments. I think one of the things that we're guilty of in this country, or something that we actually enjoy in this country, we are one of the few countries in the world that use what's known as clean water for everything that we do. And what that actually means, and this is how clean our water is that you can effectively drink the water that's in our loo. If you look at countries like I think Germany and a few of the European countries, they use a lot more what's called grey water for things like flushing the loo. And that's something, as you pointed out there, that most of the water we use goes down the loo. There is something that we should be potentially using grey water, rainwater harvesting that comes off our roofs, for example, or into water butts. And I wonder, the question there is about the behavioural change of people's acceptance to see grey water in their loo as opposed to nice clear drinking water, because the quality of water we enjoy in this country is absolutely fantastic compared to most countries around the world. But it's a luxury that has to be paid for and managed. And I think this, as maybe in time, Branka will come back and speak to you about what's happening in the new build sector and what is happening then, and these other types of initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Another question from John Stinson of Scottish Energy Centre. What's the team's thoughts on engaging school education as an overarching goal of changing the behaviour of culture and the society for the near future rather than per home? The research team used examples of people using experience of the war. Is there a case for planting the seed early, for educating children and
Yeah, that's what I said earlier on. I mean, the government's bringing in curriculum for excellence, and they are promoting all these factors through school education. And I think this is what most of the participants in the study also said, that it has to start from basic schooling. I could not really remember the whole question though, because I couldn't see it on my screen.
It is just a question about, do we need to start educating children early, to teach them early, and then not only just go in individual homes, but have a larger overarching strategy of education?
Yeah, I think it's also a part of bigger adaptation strategy. I don't know if the adaptation plan by government, which will be hopefully implemented in 2013, which has a national adaptation strategy, and they have this strategy of curriculum for excellence in the schools, where they are, which is not just about telling people, it's also about equipping stakeholders and people with all the tools, with all the information, so that they know exactly how to tackle different problems of climate change, and water scarcity is one of them. And yes, it will make an impact if it will start from school, and it is a part of this plan. If that answers to your question.
Anything else that you would like to add? We don't have any more questions from online viewers, but as a conclusion, as a way forward, the future research, any final comments on your work and plans?
I'm quite interested in, on the basis of this project, I'm quite interested in understanding how water conservation differs in probably the diversity of population. I know it's quite a hard topic, it's a hard sell, it's difficult to convince people or to engage people. But at the same time, it may be interesting to see if we have different communities in Scotland. So maybe it's the cultural influences and how water consumption differs in different sectors. I'm quite interested to have some sort of project on looking into that. I don't know how Scottish Water or how Scottish government would see if that's of any benefit, but I think it would be interesting to know, and then tackle maybe strategies based on different sectors to have them more effective.
I think it's going to be interesting in year 2 of this project, once the interventions are put in place, to see what the outcomes are, what has positive and indeed negative impacts in terms of helping people understand about water, and that old issue about behavioural change, how we might bring that about and communicate to people about water and what resonates with them and helps to bring about these positive impacts. I think it is a much wider issue than just the social housing sector. It affects all of us in all walks of life and properties, and I think the interesting bit will be in year 2 of this to see what the outcomes are and how much as well people actually reduce their water usage by once we've captured that baseline.
Here is an additional question from Malcolm McKillop of Hardy's. Scottish water figures show total leakage at a similar level to total domestic consumption. Should more resources not be directed towards this?
I think this is one of the participants also said, because there is so much leakage, so what difference does it make if I save some of the water in my own ability? I think this is one of the major barriers towards water conservation, as I found out during the course of this study.
It's a good point, really, but I think what that also reflects is the pressure on the infrastructure. We have a part to play on that, and if you think about this, it's quite a simple thing. If you have your tap on full blast in the bathroom whilst you're brushing your teeth, it takes a lot of water. That's a lot of pressure of water coming through the system, and if you're pulling that through, it has to come from somewhere, and that creates pressure on the system. Whereas if you could reduce that pressure on the system, it might help alleviate things around leakages. But I think it just goes back to the part that we all have to play in that, both Scottish Water as an organisation and us as consumers of that product that they produce for us.
I think the other thing is the climate has an impact on leakage as well, because if you have a very heavy rain, as we tend to in the west here, then you've got a higher water table to support infrastructure like water pipes. So you have less instance of leakage. But if your water table drops because you've had a very dry spell, then that means that all the infrastructure, electricity, gas and water, will drop in the infrastructure because the water is not helping to support the pipework. So it really, those are things that occur and are invested in. When I used to work at Yorkshire Water, they were spending £475 million a year to fix leakages, and they only took it down from 33% to 15%. So it's a big number.
It is. It's very costly, and some that has to be paid for.
Okay. Well, we do not have any more questions from our online viewers. We heard your conclusions, your thoughts for the future. I would like to thank our speakers here, Mehreen and Stuart, and also to thank Anita for her contribution, and just to remind our online viewers about few forthcoming events that we are organizing. We have 3 live conferences here in Glasgow. On 15th November, Integration of Sustainable Infrastructure into Existing Built Environment. That will be a conference here at Glasgow Caledonia University, and it will be followed by free Technology Strategy Board workshop on their forthcoming funding for integration of sustainable infrastructure into existing built environment. So that's tomorrow. Then on 26th of November, we have a conference on BIM and sustainability, and 28th of November, sustainable refurbishment of healthcare estates. We are also collaborating with Building Standards Division of Scottish Government and organising consultation events on building regulations in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dumfries and Inverness. You will find more information, programs and all other details about these events on our website. Thank you for watching this webinar, and we hope to see you soon in the future. Thanks.